Hello everybody and welcome to a much simpler episode of T-Girl Telepathica. I kind of just needed a break this week from the intense editing of the normal videos that I usually put out, so I decided to go back to what I used to do and sort of just have these scrolling images in the background. I hope you don't mind. But I felt that it fit especially well with the topic I wanted to go over today because I feel like drawing for this particular topic would kind of take away from the point that I'm trying to make, and I'd like to have my voice do the heavy lifting here. And today, that topic is going to be the Black Templars, and ultimately, the thing that ends up being the problem with them. So before we get into it, remember those YouTube pleasantries, remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and don't get too mad at me in the comments below. I know some of you will get extremely mad at me for my opinion here, but it's my opinion, and I'm allowed to have it. So without further ado, now you fans of the Black Templars will obviously already know everything back to front, top to bottom about them like this, but for anybody who is not in the know, the Black Templars are I believe it is technically the second founding of Space Marine chapters, but they are a chapter of the Imperial Fists, which is really interesting because they could not be less Imperial Fist if they tried. For lack of a better term, the spiritual father of their chapter was a guy named Sigismund, and Sigismund was a really, really cool character back in the Horus Heresy. He was Dorn's favorite captain for a good while, until he ended up falling into the worship of the Emperor, perpetuated by the Imperial cult that was popping up around the Horus Heresy. And the Black Templars chapter themselves really extends out from this. The Black Templars Marines are extremely, unshakably faithful, and they expect you to be as well, to a much higher degree than most other Space Marine chapters. They tend to use melee and close combat, they hate psychers with a burning passion, and they burn people alive a lot often with meltas and flamers as their main weapons. And given all of this faith, and the original opinions of Rogel Dorn, who they revere intensely despite the fact that Rogel Dorn absolutely would hate them, they hate the Codex Astartes almost as much as they would hate the Litigio Divinitatum if they learned that it was written by Lorgar. And as such, they are one of the premier chapters, along with the Space Wolves, of being the poster boys of saying fuck you to Guilliman. They do not follow the Codex Astartes at all. They make zero attempt to even try to do it. And as a result, the positions that they hold are not only more numerous than they should be, but they also have different names, such as the captain is actually called the Sword Marshal, and the chapter master is called the High Marshal, etc., etc. When it comes to outside factors outside the universe of Warhammer, their inspiration could not be more clear, especially if you look at the special helmets that they actually end up having as options for some of their models. They are very clearly the satirization and the making fun of the Crusades and the Crusaders that took part in them. This goes all the way down to their symbolism, as that cross on their shoulder pauldrons is known as the Maltese Cross, or the Cross of the Knights Hospitaller of Malta. Other than that, however, it appears that the Black Templars themselves have very, very little in common with the Maltese Crusaders. They're kind of just satirizations of Crusaders just in general. So now that you know who the Black Templars are and who they were based off of, now is where the problems start. And the first of my problems, and the very most minimal of them, are really their aesthetics. The Crusader Knight, when it comes to Space Marines, is such a generic baseline for the ideal because, if you didn't know, Space Marines in general were supposed to be based on Knights as a whole. However, then we sort of run into a problem because the Crusaders that the Black Templars take inspiration from are just way too similar to what the Dark Angels are taking inspiration from, which is the sort of Western European kind of knight. And while it is true that they are technically a very different aesthetic from a sort of different time period, I don't know, I just don't personally see enough of a difference to excuse having this many Space Marines. Secondly is their attitude and chapter culture. It is kinda pretty much just the attitude of the Sisters of Battle, except much less cool because being Space Marines and the 50th Space Marine chapter that we have on the tabletop, much less unique. It feels like the whole concept of faith is wasted on them because it feels like we already just have them in the story. They're just not Space Marines, which, I mean, we could really do with a couple less Space Marines, if you ask me. Lastly, when it comes to the tabletop, ultimately because of their weapons choice and armaments, they kind of just end up fighting like a cross between the Blood Angels and the Salamanders. And those last 2 points lead us directly into the biggest sort of problem that all Space Marines really have a hand in. The Space Marine range of models ends up taking up a full half of the models that we are able to play on the tabletop, or somewhere close to it. I'm usually not one to complain about Space Marines or the amount of Space Marines that there are. I usually do not mind as long as they are even a little bit unique. When it comes to the Black Templars, this kind of just doesn't happen enough for me to not raise an eyebrow at their existence. I should get it out of the way now. I ultimately don't think they should disappear. I think their inclusion does add something valuable. I just think they could really benefit from being a little bit more different. So even if you agree with me and you kind of don't like the Black Templars at this point, all of the problems listed don't really justify having them as the label of the problem child, because pretty much everything I've listed here, the Ultramarines are essentially guilty of, except for kinda sort of the aesthetic thing, which, yeah, if I'm complaining this much about the Black Templars, why wouldn't I be complaining about the Ultramarines? And that painfully, so unfairly comes from something that just is not their fault. That comes from the community surrounding the Black Templars. So I usually don't talk too much about drama on this channel. I kind of like to stay out of it. But when talking about the Black Templars, it is just extremely hard to avoid talking about those parts of the community. And I want to preface this section by saying, to the Black Templars fans out there who are not like this, I am not talking about you here. Especially you down in the comments below who is typing out the whole "suffer not the Xeno to live" or "suffer not the mutant, the heretic, the Xeno," that whole message thing. That's kind of cringe, but it is ultimately harmless, and I mean, who can blame you for having a joke like that? What I am talking about are the people that look at that cross mentioned earlier and see something very different where it really doesn't belong. The tourists of the 40k community. The bigots, the racists, the sexist people, the transphobic people, all ultimately end up falling under the banner of the Black Templars in the community. It is the concept I and anybody in my community, that being the LGBTQ plus community, understand when getting into Warhammer. And I believe it was said best by Bricky. I think this is who said this quote, but it was, "It's not all Black Templars fans, but it's always a Black Templars fan." The very existence of these touristic people who just want to come in, claim they are the pillars of the community and try to push us out, really soils the reputation of the Black Templars. It is a fantastic thing that they have ultimately always failed For example, that whole female custodes drama that happened a while back, and they tried to establish themselves in the community only to get pushed out within 2 weeks, and now they can only really exist on Twitter. Ultimately, when it comes to these people, the right thing to do is to ignore them. However, once again, speaking to the Black Templars fans out there, the good ones, the Black Templars could be something great. They could be another fantastic faction within this wonderful world. It's just that they need to have a little bit of work done to clean them up. And for now, that will be the episode for today. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you good Black Templars fans take what I have said today to heart, because ultimately I do think the Warhammer community is a lot better having you specifically, in it. We just need to work on telling the bad fans where exactly they can put their rhetoric. I have been Inquisitor Calliope, and thank you all so much for watching. See you next week. Bye!